The rain had been falling since supper, not hard, but steady enough to darken every board on the porch. I remember the smell of wet wool hanging near the stove and the little yellow flame inside the kerosene lamp bending each time the wind pressed against the kitchen window. I was standing in the hallway with one hand on the latch of the spare room. On the other side of that thin plaster wall, my daughter whispered one word, "No." She did not shout it. She did not call for me. She said it so quietly that another man might have convinced himself he had heard nothing at all. I heard her. I stood there, and I did not open the door. My name is Mahlan. I have been Amish all my life, and I have farmed the same ground for more than 50 years. I am a father, a grandfather, and now a great-grandfather, which means I have had a long time to learn how easily a man can mistake silence for patience and fear for humility. I tell these stories because age gives you no power to change what happened, but it can give you the honesty to name it. As you listen, I would like you to think about this. When someone says no very softly, does that make our duty to hear it any smaller? My daughter was 29 years old that autumn. Her name was Miriam. She had been married for 8 years and had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all young enough that they still fell asleep wherever their heads happened to rest. She lived less than 5 miles from us, but in those years 5 miles could hold a great deal of distance. We saw her at Sunday worship. We saw her at weddings, barn raisings, and funerals. We saw her carrying casseroles into other people's kitchens and folding her hands at the proper moments. We saw what she allowed us to see. That is one of the hardest truths a father learns when his children are grown. You can know the shape of your daughter's face better than your own, and still fail to understand the life behind it. On the evening she came home, the maple leaves were already flattened along the lane by rain. I heard the wagon before I saw it. The wheels made a slow sucking sound in the mud, and the horse stopped unevenly near the porch as though it had been driven by someone whose hands were not steady. Miriam climbed down alone. She had no bonnet on. Her hair was pinned but poorly, and several dark strands had worked loose against her cheeks. She carried one small carpet bag. No children, no husband. She stood under the porch roof and looked past me into the house, not because she was being rude, but because she was checking whether she had truly reached a safe place. I did not understand that then. I understand it now. Ruth, my wife, took the bag from her. I asked where the children were. Miriam said they were with her husband's sister and that they were safe for the night. She did not offer more. I asked whether Amos knew she had come. She looked at the floorboards and nodded once. There was a small red mark around her wrist, not a wound, just a mark. I saw it. Then I looked away. This is how a failure begins sometimes, not with cruelty, not with a raised hand. It begins with a man deciding that the thing he has noticed is not yet enough to require him. We gave her soup, though she ate almost none of it. Ruth warmed water and set out a dry dress. Miriam sat near the stove with both hands around a cup of tea until the steam stopped rising. I wanted her to explain herself. I wanted a neat account that would tell me who was right, who was wrong, and what could be done before morning chores. That was the farmer in me. A broken fence has a place where it broke. A sick cow has symptoms. A field either drains or it does not. Family pain does not present itself that way. It comes in pieces. It comes with shame. It comes after years of practice hiding it. Miriam told us only that she could not go back that night. She said Amos had been angry for a long time. She said he watched every letter she wrote and questioned every visit she made. She said he had begun deciding when she could speak to her own mother. She did not accuse him of everything. She barely accused him of anything. She kept protecting him even while asking shelter from him. I had seen that kind of loyalty before, but I had called it devotion. That night I began to see another name for it. Fear can dress itself in the same plain clothes as obedience. I wish I could tell you that I understood immediately. I did not. I thought about the Ordnung. I thought about the vows made before God and the church. I thought about the danger of a father stepping between a husband and wife. I thought about what the bishop would say if I encouraged separation. I thought about the children waking without their mother. I thought about everything except the frightened woman sitting 6 feet from me. That is the shame of it. A man can fill his mind with serious things, so he does not have to look at the simple thing in front of him. Miriam needed one night in her father's house without being persuaded, corrected, or returned. I could have given her that. The spare room shared a wall with the hallway. It was a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a quilt Ruth had pieced from old work shirts. Miriam slept there when she was a girl. The marks from a shelf I had removed were still visible beneath the whitewash. I carried her bag inside and set it beside the bed. On my way out, I noticed that she had placed the wooden chair under the doorknob. I did not ask why. I told myself she wanted privacy. Before sunrise, Amos came. I heard the wagon pull into the lane while I was milking. He had brought the deacon with him, an older man I respected. That mattered too much to me. Respect is good when it helps you listen. It becomes dangerous when it teaches you not to think. Amos looked tired and wet. His beard was untrimmed and mud covered the lower part of his trousers. He did not greet Ruth. He asked for his wife. The deacon spoke gently about marriage, order, and the need to keep a disagreement from becoming a division. None of those words were false. That made them harder to resist. A true word can still be used at the wrong time. Bread is good, but you do not press it against a wound. Miriam came from the spare room wearing the dry dress Ruth had given her. Her eyes looked older than they had the evening before. She would not sit beside Amos. The deacon asked whether the two of them could speak alone. I should have said no. I should have said she had asked for shelter and would have it until she decided otherwise. Instead, I opened the spare room door and let them go inside. The deacon remained with Ruth in the kitchen. I stood in the hallway. The wall was so thin I could hear the bed frame creak when someone sat down. Amos spoke in a low voice. I could not make out every word, only the rhythm of them. Question, silence, then his voice became firmer. There are moments the body understands before the mind admits anything. My shoulders tightened. My hand went to the latch. I heard Miriam whisper no. I waited for another word. None came. I waited for her to call my name. She did not. I told myself that an adult daughter must make her own decisions. I told myself that opening the door would shame her. I told myself the deacon was 10 steps away, and surely God had placed wiser authority in the house than me. Then I heard the chair scrape across the floor. I still did not open it. Ruth had come into the hallway without my noticing. She looked at my hand resting on the latch and then at my face. She said, "A closed door does not make what happens behind it none of yours." That was the only sentence she spoke. She went back to the kitchen. I wish I could say her words moved me at once. They moved me, but not far enough. That is another hard truth. Sometimes you are warned clearly and still choose the easier path. I opened the door only after Amos opened it from inside. Miriam stood near the washstand with her arms folded tightly across herself. Amos said they were going home. The words sounded settled, as though the matter had been decided by someone more important than the woman standing beside him. I looked at Miriam. She did not meet my eyes. I asked whether that was what she wanted, but I asked it weakly, with Amos beside her and the deacon behind me. A question is not honest when every part of the room has already told a person which answer will cost the least. She nodded. I stepped aside. I can still see the damp hem of her dress as she walked down the porch steps. The rain had stopped, but water continued dripping from the eaves in a slow line. She climbed into the wagon. Amos took the reins. Miriam looked once toward the kitchen window where Ruth stood. She did not look at me. For many years I told myself that she had chosen to go. That sentence protected me. It was also a lie. She had made a decision under pressure, and I had helped create the pressure by refusing to stand beside her. I did not force her into the wagon. I did something quieter. I made safety feel unavailable. The farm went on. That is one of the cruelties of ordinary life. Cows still need milking after you fail someone. Fence posts still rot. Corn still dries in the crib. The sun rises on a man whether he deserves the light or not. For the next 6 weeks, Miriam did not visit. At worship, she sat with the women, her face turned toward the minister. Amos sat with the men. From across the room, they looked like every other married couple. I began to notice how much can be hidden by everyone sitting in the proper place. Ruth did not accuse me. She did not need to. We worked beside one another in the quiet way of people who have shared a life long enough to know when words would only give a man another place to hide. Each night I remembered the chair scraping. I remembered my hand on the latch. I remembered how close I had been to doing the right thing. Being close is no comfort. A door is either opened or it is not. 2 months later, just before the first snow, Miriam came again. This time she brought the children. They had walked part of the way after the wagon wheel broke on the frozen lane. The youngest boy was crying from cold, and her little girl had only one mitten. Miriam's face was pale. She carried no carpet bag. She had left quickly. I was repairing a harness in the workshop when I saw them through the window. There are moments when God or mercy or simple human need gives a man one more chance. It is not the same as erasing the first failure. Nothing erases it, but a second chance is still holy if you do not waste it. I crossed the yard before she reached the porch. I took the youngest child in my arms. I did not ask what had happened. I did not ask whether Amos knew. I did not ask what the bishop would think. I opened the door, that is all. Sometimes the first act of repentance is very small. You open the door you should have opened before. Miriam stayed that winter. There was no easy ending. People visited. Some came with kindness. Some came carrying advice heavy enough to bend a table. The bishop met with us more than once. Amos asked for her return. There were letters. There were long silences. There were members of the district who believed I was weakening the church by giving her shelter. Others said little but left food on the porch after dark. Communities are not made of one kind of person, neither are churches. Some people use order to protect the vulnerable. Some use it to protect themselves from discomfort. For many weeks I did not know which kind of man I had been. Miriam did not tell us everything at once. She did not owe us everything at once. That is something I learned slowly. When a person has spent years having her judgment questioned, even loving questions can feel like another examination. So we gave her work she could choose. She helped Ruth with sewing some days. Other days she carried kindling or sat by the stove without speaking. The children began sleeping through the night. The oldest boy stopped flinching when a wagon entered the lane. I noticed these things. I did not ask him to explain them. The explanation was already in his body. Amos never lived under our roof again. In time, the church recognized that Miriam could not safely return to the marriage as it had been. I will not turn that process into a clean victory. It was slow, painful, and imperfect. Some relationships were never repaired. Miriam lost friends she had known since childhood. Her children heard whispers. Ruth and I were invited to fewer suppers. There were men who crossed the road rather than speak to me. I had once feared those consequences so much that I left my daughter alone behind a thin wall. When they finally came, I discovered they were lighter than the knowledge that I had not protected her. Shame makes cowards of us by exaggerating the weight of other people's opinions and minimizing the weight carried by the person beside us. Miriam built another life, though not the life she had expected. She learned bookkeeping from a cousin and later helped several families with accounts. Her children grew. The oldest became a carpenter. Her daughter married a patient man from another district. The youngest boy, the one I carried in from the cold, now has children of his own. Miriam is a grandmother today. She laughs more easily than she did then, but there are certain rooms she will not sleep in with the door closed. Time can soften a memory without removing its shape. We do not honor survivors by pretending healing means forgetting. Many years after that rainy night, Miriam and I sat together on the porch while Ruth shelled peas. I wanted to apologize properly. I had apologized before, but mostly in pieces, the way proud men do when they hope regret will be understood without being spoken plainly. That day I told her I had heard her say no. I told her I had known enough to open the door and had chosen not to. I did not explain the church rules. I did not mention the deacon. I did not say I was confused. Explanations can become a way of asking the injured person to comfort the one who failed. I simply told the truth. She listened. She did not hurry to forgive me. I'm grateful for that now. Forgiveness offered too quickly can become another burden placed on the person who already carried too much. She reached for another peapod and continued working. We sat in the sound of shells falling into the tin bowl. Eventually, she rested her hand on my wrist for a moment. That was all. It was more mercy than I had earned. I have been asked whether I forgave myself. The title of this story says I never did, and that is true, though perhaps not in the way people expect. I do not spend every day punishing myself. Self-punishment can be another form of selfishness because it keeps the focus on the wrong person. I do not believe Miriam needed a father who remained forever broken by his failure. She needed a father who became safer because of it. So I did not forgive myself by declaring the matter finished. I forgave myself enough to keep living honestly, but never enough to call what I did acceptable. Some memories should remain tender. Tenderness is how the conscience keeps them useful. After that winter, when one of my children or grandchildren came to me afraid, I tried to listen before asking how the situation might look to others. When a young man in our district spoke harshly about a wife who had left, I did not sit quietly. When another father said family matters should remain behind closed doors, I told him that closed doors do not cancel responsibility. I did not become a brave man in every circumstance. Age has not made me perfect, but I learned that peace is not the absence of noise. Sometimes peace requires a knock, a witness, a refusal to leave someone alone. I also learned that protecting an adult child does not mean controlling her choices. That was one of the lies I used against myself. I believed there were only two options: stay out completely or take over her life. Love offered a third way: stand beside her, make room, tell the truth, let her decide without making safety conditional on the answer you prefer. Parents often imagine their duty becomes smaller when a child reaches adulthood. In some ways it does. We cannot choose their spouse, their work, their faith, or their road. But our duty to recognize their humanity does not shrink. A grown daughter can still need her father to believe the word no. A grown son can still need a mother to notice fear in his face. Age changes the form of care. It does not end it. I have thought often about why Miriam whispered. She had been taught to be quiet. She had been taught that anger was more dangerous when answered. She had been taught that a good woman did not make private trouble public, but I believe there was another reason. Some part of her still expected me to hear. A whisper is not always weakness. Sometimes it is the last small bridge a person is able to build toward help. I stood on the other side of that bridge and waited for it to become larger. That is what I cannot forgive. I wanted her need to arrive in a form that removed all uncertainty and all cost. Real need seldom does. It trembles. It contradicts itself. It says no softly and then nods when asked the wrong question in the wrong room. If you love someone, you must learn to hear more than the final answer. You must notice the conditions under which it was given. 70 years have taught me one plain thing. Silence is not neutral when you are the person with the power to open the door. We like to believe harm belongs only to the one who causes it directly. But sometimes harm is strengthened by the decent people nearby who are waiting for permission to act. No always deserves to be heard. It does not become less sacred because it is whispered, because the speaker is married, because the family is respected, or because intervention may embarrass the community. A person's dignity is not a private custom. It is a responsibility shared by everyone close enough to hear. I still remember the rain. I still remember the lamp flame bending at the window. I still remember my hand on that latch. What I cannot change, I can at least refuse to disguise. And what I learned too late, I can tell you now. Open the door. If these stories from a long Amish life mean something to you, you are welcome to subscribe and sit with me again. And in the comments, tell me this: was there ever a moment when someone quietly needed you to step closer? And what did you learn from the choice you made?